You're listening to the Future of Convenience podcast, featuring senior retail executives and experts in the global convenience and mobility industry. Well, welcome to the Future of Convenience podcast. I'm Carolyn Schnare, and I'm joined by my co-host, Dan Munford. Hey, Dan.
Hi, Carolyn. How's it going?
It's going great today. It's a Friday, though. It's fantastic Friday. We're going to talk about one of your favorite topics, and that's mobility. We're going to talk about site planning to ensure future-proof network strategy.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of my favorite topics for sure, Carolyn. And I think the interesting thing about today's discussion is that we're very much in the age of the energy transition, but we're also in the age of rapid foodvenience expansion. So in that context, network planning is not only a vital art, it's a vital science as well.
Before we get started, I wanted to ask, if you run a fuel, mobility, or convenience business, here's a question. Are your forecourts leaking profits? Unplanned downtime, slow repairs, and inefficient maintenance could be costing you more than you think. That's where Urgent from Techniche comes in. It's the only complete asset and maintenance management platform built specifically for retailers like you. Over 40,000 locations worldwide trust Urgent to keep their business-critical assets running smoothly, automating maintenance, improving contractor performance, and giving them complete visibility and control. With Urgent, you can increase asset uptime, enhance customer experience, and drive more revenue, all while reducing costs and avoiding unexpected breakdowns. Visit technichegroup.com/urgent and take control of your operations today. So, Dan, we're going to talk a little bit about fuel retailers and how they can use data-driven site planning, like we discussed, and to how they're going to strengthen profitability, long-term performance, both current sites, future shifts like EV adoption. And we have a couple experts in this area who know this topic like the back of their hands. And you know them quite well, too. Would you like to bring them on?
Yeah, of course. And like you said, I think the interesting thing about network planning is it's not always considered comprehensively, consistently, or for that matter, continuously. I must say, when I over many decades, I suppose, about when I talk to CEOs about this, some of the best businesses out there are the ones that are consistently, continuously reviewing their network and optimizing it. And give you one example, I mean, Quick Trip in the US, very scientific focused business. They're always opening new stores, and they're opening more new stores than they close, but they're also closing stores because they're continuously reviewing their network and they're optimizing it. And I think, and they really, when you speak to the CEO of a business like that, that's one of the things they always, it's not the only thing they focus on, but it's always up there in the top 3 or 4 things that they're always doing. So I think this is an area which is good to get into today.
Yeah, it's definitely better than planning by your gut and thinking that just seems like a good place to put a convenience store.
Absolutely. So, I think we're in the right place. We've got the right people. We've got two good friends of mine from Kalibrate. So let me introduce Rich Wilcox, who's Vice President of Solution Consulting and EV with Kalibrate, and also longtime friend Simon Martin, VP of International Sales. Welcome, guys.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Thanks, Carolyn. Great to be here.
Thanks for having us.
So, Rich, would you mind telling our audience a little bit about Kalibrate? What are you? Who are you? Where are you? Where do you operate?
Sure. So Kalibrate's a company that's been around for a long time now, upwards of 50 years. And we really help fuel, convenience, and other types of retailers identify the best locations to build new sites, to help optimize their existing network, set appropriate pricing strategies, and really maximize the potential of their locations that they have.
Absolutely. And just thinking about your particular role, Rich, just tell us about the role that you do at Kalibrate as well, because I see the EV is in that job title.
Yeah, sure. So I've been working in the solution consulting world for about 10 years at Kalibrate now. We sit within the product group, supporting our client-facing teams, and really we're here as the subject matter experts from a platform, data, and analytics perspective. And a few years ago, I also took over the role of head of product for our EV, so helping both from a EV charger placement strategy, identifying the highest potential from a utilization perspective, locations to build chargers, putting the appropriate infrastructure in place in terms of speed of charger, number of connectors and EVSEs at each location. And we're also actively now helping both fuel retailers and CPOs optimize their price position at the sites as well.
Absolutely. Well, that makes a lot of sense. So we'll dig into the EV dimension, which is one of the things that we'll be talking about today in terms of reviewing, and optimizing your portfolio. Simon, maybe I could just bring you in, to just give a context on how your role at Kalibrate and your sort of overview of what happens in the business globally.
Yeah, of course. Happy to. So yeah, I'm the head of our commercial function globally that focuses on the fuel, convenience, and mobility retail segment. So that's across our entire solution portfolio, incorporating fuel price optimization, location intelligence, and predictive analytics within that, and also a subset of some of our consulting capabilities as well. So, both Rich and I are of a similar vintage. We've been with the business sort of 10 to 12 years, and having worked globally with fuel and convenience retailers of varying shapes and sizes, we're very proud to be part of a strategic mix of decision-making tools that clients use to identify, evaluate, and then future predict how their sites can and should perform within the marketplace.
Yeah. Well, makes a lot of sense. So obviously we have a lot of discussions about this. I always find them really interesting with you guys, and maybe just direct the next sort of discussion point to you, Simon, just in terms of location and build, this discipline of fuel planning, and identifying opportunities. What are the best practices that you see globally across your client base? Because I think you have a unique perspective on this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that really stands out is that the best businesses see their network and the planning of that network as something that has a life cycle, meaning that there's a lot of different phases to it, but each of those phases are equally important and require the same level of rigor in terms of the analytical focus. And so what that means is the clients that we deal with and other clients who've developed their own very high level competence, they're very good at combining data-driven scientific processes along with the corporate knowledge and experience that they might have to also guide those decisions. So, I think from my perspective, if you look at some of the convenience retailers in the US market, for example, who might have had locations at every property on one intersection over a period of 40, 50 years, they're constantly looking for, those marginal gains. And we say that quite lightly because obviously closing a site and then redeveloping another one is not an insignificant investment to be made. But you can see that with the right combination of data, tools, and experience, you can soundly make those decisions and know that you're going to get a valid return from in the future.
I mean, just one point on that, in terms of obviously a lot of the businesses that you work for are growing. And so obviously that brings the necessity to optimize, to look at site potential and so on all the time. But even if businesses aren't growing, do they still need to be, looking at their network planning and evaluating, optimizing it? I think it's a key question.
Yeah, I mean, our perspective is, of course, yes. So we've got a global and quite diverse client base utilizing our solutions, and depending on where in the world you are, and what type of business you are, and what stage of overall network and market maturity you're in, there are different investment decisions that need to be made. So yes, of course, if you're in a high growth mode, and that means you're building lots of new to industry sites, for example, or you're acquiring networks, that's very capital intensive. But our view is that every client of ours is constantly looking at their network and assessing, what's changing in their network, what's changing in their competitor set, what are the consumer behaviors doing around them, and how do they then need to lean into that and make adjustments on their site. So, I think historically, network planning has probably been one of the most underinvested disciplines within any fuel and convenience retailer. From a technology perspective, I think they've always invested in people and having the right level of competence and expertise to drive their decisions. But over time, those types of businesses are not necessarily bringing those people along. And in the absence of those tools, I've met businesses who still go traffic count, assumed turn-in ratio, and average fill, and that will be their volume projection for a site. So that's still quite rudimentary when you're thinking about an investment that's multi-million-dollar. So what we really encourage is any fuel retailer that wants to go from, good to better to best, is to start examining, well, how do you take disparate data set, understand the relationships between all of those different data attributes and their correlation to performance and consumer behavior, to then forward predict how a site's going to perform in the future. And again, historically, that was quite heavily centered on, the fuels business. But now we're seeing that bleed into the ancillary services around convenience retail, food service, car wash, and, even moving into the alternative energy space as well.
Well, Richard, maybe you could come in on that as well. But just, I guess, one perspective from me on this is that obviously we look at the operations of businesses out there at the roadside and how increasingly complex they're getting. So obviously, if you have a small convenience stores, obviously been around a long time with in fuel stations, which in themselves made the business more complicated and the location strategy more complicated and more important too, because you're thinking about a very broad offer of products, not just the fueling by any means. As foodvenience, as we call it, or food service, has become a more and more important part of these locations, and that this is obviously a global phenomenon. It's not we're not just looking at the EV aspect, which we'll come to in a minute, but looking at the requirements to have a successful food service location as well as a successful fueling convenience store location. I mean, these decisions have become quite multifaceted and complicated, haven't they?
They really have. And, for us, it's really about understanding the trade area around a site. And, historically, people would use either a crow fly's distance or maybe a drive time around the site. But increasingly, we're seeing the best retailers out there, regardless of the space that they're in, start to use things like mobility data, right? And that can be human footfall data, it can be connected car data. And really, that allows you to understand whether a site is transiency, pulling people off major highways or thoroughfares, or whether it's more residential, just looking for or just catering for the people that live around the site. And by doing that, once you understand the trade area, you can start to look at not just the traffic, but the sociodemographic characteristics of your customers, and use that to really refine what product selection you put at the site. Is it a grab and go concept from people that are on a longer journey? Is it a higher quality food offering that you might want to take home with you and have for dinner? Is it a laundromat, or going down the EV route? Is it a charger that might be used by local residences that don't have the option to install a charger at home? So really, for us, it all starts with understanding that trade area, understanding the customer base, and then optimizing the product selection or offering selection based on that.
So staying with that EV discussion there, electric vehicles are, just coming around, for at least here in the United States. I just bought one. Finally, anybody who's listened to this show at all has heard me talking about this for years of I'm going to get an EV. Well, I did. So now I have it. So now I need to figure out how to charge it. And it's few and far between. And especially as I get further down away out of the city here, it's harder to find that. So I know that retailers are struggling with this. Should I put an EV charger and should I not? What's going on? And a lot of it is still going on gut. It sounds like, well, I probably should put one in, the future's coming. Maybe I should do that. But I know you guys have probably a little bit more science behind that in terms of, yes, you need to do this because you have X number of EV drivers. So tell me a little bit more about the data that you collect and how someone should help really figure out whether it's time to put in an EV charger, whether it's time to start a brand new site for that.
Sure. So everyone really just looks at number of EVs or perceived number of EVs on the road near their sites. We try and take that a little bit further by looking at both current EV adoption, but also looking at how we expect EV adoption to evolve over time. And we've created something called the EV adoption curve based on primary research that Kalibrate's conducted, as well as some pretty in-depth customer segmentation data. And that allows us to see what percentage of vehicles we expect to transition from ICE to EV almost year on year over the foreseeable future, to determine if EV adoption is likely to grow. And then, of course, it comes back to that trade area piece, right? Are you serving local residents? If so, if the site's surrounded by affluent families with driveways and the ability to charge at home, they're very unlikely to use public charging infrastructure nearby their sites. Whereas if it's densely populated by multifamily dwellings, i.e. apartment blocks, with limited access to charging infrastructure at their home, then they're far more likely to need to use the local gas station or EV charging hubs to be able to have a full battery to go about their daily business. So it's really a combination of understanding EV adoption today, how it's likely to evolve over the future, what the characteristics of the sites are, and what type of customers that EV charger is likely to draw in.
And Simon, let me also, just to build on this a little bit, what about the fuel side of that? Like, or what does a retailer do in terms of like, you're going to have a decreased fuel demand, or will you, if once that EV chargers are there?
Yeah, and that's a great question, which varies in different markets, right? So if you look in general in European markets, for example, overall fuel demand is in decline, and then it'll be more acute in certain places like Norway, for instance, where EV adoption is far outstripping any other country in the world at the moment. But we encourage clients to look at these things, they're hand in glove, right? You can't look at one thing without the other, and trying to establish the pace and rate of that change is quite important. There's also an element as well, like strategic for clients about what sort of identity that they want to take forward. So what I mean by that is I've spoken to some retailers in one of the larger European markets where EV adoption is gathering a bit of pace. One of them's got a relatively simple, low budget, price-seeking fuels business, and they're contemplating getting into EV charging, but without necessarily a lot of the other non-fuel infrastructure already at their locations. And then conversely, another player who maybe has some of that existing non-fuel stuff that would be relevant and you could argue mandatory to satisfy well an EV client, they said, actually, this is too expensive and too hard, and we don't want to get into that. So some of these things are consumer and demand led, and some of the things are very pure business economics. Like if it's going to cost me 150,000 euro to get the relevant electricity supply in, maybe I don't want to do that because it's not going to make a return for me at that time. So what we really encourage actually is to start look at these things more holistically, to say, okay, here's my fuels business, and although in general demand might be in decline, if I were to introduce a new location or try and seek an improvement in the volume of a current one, what's the best way to go about that? And then adjacent to that is how do I provide a good non-fuel offer, the right sort of convenience store, right size, shape, offer, assortment. These things are very, very important to marry those with the fuels business. Food service as well. We see increasingly clients that have got enough space, they want multiple QSRs on that location, not just one. So no longer are you saying, okay, so it'll be satisfactory to simply have a McDonald's. Well, now I live in Whitchurch in the UK, and there's a location near to me that's got Subway, McDonald's, Greggs, and a Starbucks all on a single location. So those are the types of things that will be setting standards then in the future, and clearly that's leaning into what consumer behavior is telling those businesses to do. They're not doing that for an experiment. They're doing that with, that combination of data, technology, and expertise to say which of those QSR brands need to go in which places in order to satisfy the best assortment of consumers, and doing that in a sustainable fashion as well.
No, very, very interesting. So perhaps it's a bit of a naive question from me, but thinking about the history of the evolution of our sector, over 120 years we've been going. Looking back in the early days, the location strategy and the sort of network planning was all about looking at fuel locations, liquid fuel locations, and where the right ones were. And I suppose it was quite a simple thing for decisions to be made on that basis. Look, fast forward to today, and obviously you've got, as we've already been discussing on the podcast today, you've got your food service dimension, your quick service restaurant dimension, you've got your convenience store location, as well as fuel and perhaps EV as a factor here. Do you see a sort of do you see businesses taking good decisions here, looking across the whole gambit of factors, or do you sometimes still see fuel teams perhaps playing the most important part in this decision, even though it's not just their product that they need to think about these days?
Yeah, I think that's an evolving theme, actually. So I can think of one client that we're working with, actually, a European client who's very deliberately transitioning from being an oil company to a mobility services provider. And they are well joined up across fuels, non-fuels, and alternative energies. There's other examples, though, where the fuels business is still contributing 70 or 80% of the profitability, and therefore have a strong voice. And equally, I've come across clients that are maybe in markets where the convenience and food service isn't quite as mature or well established, but they're starting to have a stronger voice in the planning decisions that get taken. So thinking about this concept of continuous and comprehensive network planning, that means to say, if you're opening a new location, then it should be across all of those different factors. If you're redeveloping a location, that's an opportunity again for the traditional fuels business to be perhaps a little bit quieter, and then the colleagues in non-fuel convenience retail to be having a bit more of an input. And Rich was mentioning there the different data sets that can be leveraged now. That those are essential, really, to getting that different lens, because they would differ from the historical experience of someone who's maybe just planning a fuels business site network.
So Simon and Rich, we've talked a little bit about future planning, everything else, but looking slightly into the future, where can folks learn more about this? I hear we've got a big convention coming up where they might be able to meet you. Simon?
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll be exhibiting at the NAC show in Chicago this October, which is obviously one of the mainstays for our industry, for peers, suppliers, and retailers to gather together. And this year we're very excited to invite people to come and visit us at our booth, not only to meet some of the subject matter experts as part of our business, but also to engage with our network planning feature game, in which we're drawing on some of the tangible capabilities that our solution offers and trying to gamify it, if you will, to allow people to access that in a little bit more of a condensed manner through a 5 or 10 minute visit. So it'd be great to do that at the next show in October.
Fantastic. Well, I look forward to popping by.
Well, that sounds like an exciting train set to play with. I'll look forward to having a go on that myself.
Yeah, for sure. So this has been really cool, and I know our listeners will really have taken something away, maybe some nuggets for thought, and then also can reach out to you, I'm assuming, on LinkedIn. You both are there, and your website, which is what, Simon?
Yeah, absolutely. Both of us quite prominent on LinkedIn, so you can contact us there, and also visiting our corporate website, Kalibrate.com. You'll see a full array of our solutions and capabilities, as well as client stories there as well.
Well, Rich and Simon, really great having a chat with you today. Always very interesting, and look forward to seeing you both at the NAC show. I'll be visiting your stand there. Look forward to it.
Absolutely. Thanks very much.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yes, and thank you for all that insight, and thank you for listening to The Future of Convenience. Thank you for listening to the Future of Convenience podcast, produced by Dan Munford, Nick Scherzer, Jenna Ferguson, and Lorraine Evans. It is produced and edited and mixed by Carolyn Schnare, and music is provided by Jukebox Music. Learn more at globalconvenience.com.